Alright, so in today's video we have an interview with Naoki Hamaguchi, who is the director of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And this is an article that's been around for a few weeks now, but I've been sitting on it because I wasn't really quite sure on how to approach it. This video has taken multiple forms, multiple scrapped videos, but I think I finally distilled down the key aspects that I really wanted to focus on. And that's the evolution of the 7 Remake battle system to Rebirth with the introduction of these synergy skills and abilities. And the reason why they added those isn't just to spice up gameplay, which is pretty cool. And also we talk about the game's overall tone and how they're balancing it to match the original Final Fantasy VII, but also what we saw in 7 Remake. So if any of that sounds cool to you, or if you're new here, feel free to click the like button and subscribe. It is always much appreciated when you do stick around, and it really still kind of blows my mind that people actually subscribe and want to come back and watch these videos. But thank you, it means a lot. So this interview comes to us from Press Start, which is an Australian gaming outlet, and they sat down with Naoki Hamaguchi a few weeks ago around the Tokyo Game Show time period. And most of the article covers stuff we already knew, like the basic PR stuff about the story and the world and exploration, but there was really some fascinating statements made by Hamaguchi in regards to evolving the battle system from 7 Remake to Rebirth, which I absolutely love that battle system. I think it's damn near perfect. There are some flaws, but they're pretty small, and it seems like they've been addressing them in something like the Integrate DLC, but also in Rebirth. And they go on to talk more about the introduction of these synergy skills and abilities. And interestingly enough, Hamaguchi states that they didn't just add that stuff to evolve the gameplay from Remake to Rebirth, but it actually was added in because of new gameplay and scenario elements. Hamaguchi goes on to say, as you probably know if you have played the original Final Fantasy VII, you know what's in this part of the story. It follows from when Cloud and his gang left Midgar through to the Forgotten Capital. And they redact this next part because obviously it's a massive spoiler. And they continue, and in that part of the journey, the characters really get to know each other. The bonds between them get stronger. They get to know each other more, and you really see them coming together as a team. So we wanted to have a kind of representation of that in the gameplay overall, not just in the story side of things. So it really feels holistic and combined. So that was where we got the idea that in battle we can have a mechanic which basically reflects that, and where the characters come together and the better they know each other, the closer they become, gives them more collaborative abilities in battle. So that's kind of where the idea came from. So that to me is music to my ears, knowing that they not just wanted to evolve the battle system because hey, it's a new game, but they wanted to find ways to incorporate the character relationships and the overall scenario into the gameplay. That to me shows that there is a lot of dedication and passion there to make Rebirth the best that it can possibly be. And I think they've done a fantastic job so far with 7 Remake in establishing these characters and their bonds and seeing their relationships grow. I think one of the greatest examples in 7 Remake is Cloud and Barrett. They start off in a very contentious relationship. They don't really like each other, but throughout the game you see both of them start to open up more. And while they may not see eye to eye with one another, they eventually come to trust one another and form this team with Tifa and Aerith and Red 13. So it really is a ragtag group of characters, and the fact that they're taking those bonds from the story side and incorporating them into gameplay is something that I really value and appreciate, because it makes gameplay that much more special, because I feel like these people, whether they're controlled by me or the computer, these feel like real breathing characters that I've come to know and love, and they care about one another. And a game that I think does that perfectly is Final Fantasy 15. I've talked about this in previous videos, but for every flaw that 15 has, the one thing it absolutely nails are the characters and their bonds and relationships. You see those characters grow with one another. Noctis, Ignis, Gladio, and Prompto. You can feel the love between them, and it's not just in the story side of things with cutscenes. You see it throughout every aspect of gameplay, whether you're fishing or eating at a diner or setting up a camp or hearing the banter between the characters as they explore a really creepy dark dungeon, or seeing them support one another in battle. That was felt all throughout that gameplay. There was not a single moment in 15 where I felt like the characters were just kind of cardboard cutouts or they didn't really care about one another. I think they nailed that in 15, and I'm super excited to see that explored even further in Rebirth. And not to get too negative here, but I think a game that really failed at that was Final Fantasy 16. And by, product, 16 is Clive's story. It's a Clive-centric game, so everything is about him, but there are moments in that game where you do get party members, but they just feel like they're there. controlled by a computer. They very rarely will chime in with any type of banter, they don't do any team-up attacks, and even when you're doing side quests with a full party of people, the side quests completely ignore those 2 extra characters you have with you. They're not in the cutscenes, they're not referenced by any of the NPCs or even Clive, and I think there was only one occasion where I had a party member actually reference the side quest that we were doing, and that was pretty much it. But I didn't feel the connection with those characters outside of the cutscenes. Gameplay just felt like, here's Clive, here's some people to back you up, that's about it. And when you can make the effort to incorporate those bonds into gameplay, I think it makes me as a player feel so much closer and more invested in these people and these characters and seeing where they're going to end up. Up next, they talked to Hamaguchi about how the overall goofiness and lightheartedness from the original Final Fantasy VII is still alive and well in the trailers we've been seeing so far in Rebirth. And Hamaguchi goes on to talk about how they're nailing that balance between lighthearted and goofy, but also being dramatic and really serious. He goes on to say, certainly in terms of what's in the game itself and how it compares to the original 7 Remake, Remake was, as it was a very story-driven game, it was very dramatic, and there was always this high drama as you went through pretty much the whole thing. And that was the tone of it, which worked very well for that game. What we thought when we were putting this content together, if you're going around the world discovering so many new things and seeing stuff, is if it was all the same kind of tone, the same kind of pace, if it was all really dark and really serious, you'd get bored of that. So we decided to add in lots of different thematic tones to the different content you find. Some of it's comical and funny and a little bit lighthearted. Other stuff is a bit more serious and a bit more dramatic, and that gives a good balance there. So if you played the original Final Fantasy VII, that's basically what the original 7 was in terms of its pacing and tone. It went into a lot of different directions, and it's for new people as well. I think that's something that's maybe going to surprise them. It's not something you see so often out there, and they can say, oh, so a piece of entertainment doesn't have to just be dark, or it doesn't just have to be comical and lighthearted. You can have both in the same thing. So we think that kind of balance there is going to be something that appeals to a very broad audience and lots of different gamers. People who have played the original and people who haven't. Which again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record here because I've mentioned it in other videos, but Hamaguchi just gets it. He completely understands the original Final Fantasy VII, its tone, its characters, what made it feel so special, and he's evolving that tenfold in Rebirth. And talking about that tone balance, I think they nailed it in 7 Remake. You know, it's a game where Cloud dresses up as a woman in one chapter, and then immediately following that, they get the news that, hey, Shinra is going to basically sabotage the Avalanche group and drop the Sector 7 plate on a bunch of people, killing them and destroying their homes. So there's this balance there where it's silly and goofy and Cloud is dancing at the Honeybee Inn, but also he's dealing with this very serious situation and how it's affecting Tifa and how it's going to affect Barrett and Avalanche. And there's that really heartfelt scene afterwards where Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett are going through the rubble and they're looking for Jesse and Biggs and Wedge, and he even thinks that his own daughter might be dead. And Barrett just lets loose and he can't handle it anymore, and he starts punching these cement blocks and Tifa breaks down, and they really nail that throughout 7 Remake. And you look at the original Final Fantasy VII, you had these very chibi characters with their animations, and it was fun and lighthearted and goofy. But again, you also had those moments where, this might be a bit of a spoiler alert if you haven't played the original, so spoiler warning, you've been warned. But one of my favorite moments in the original Final Fantasy VII is when you go through Cosmo Canyon and you get to the very end, I believe it's the Cave of the Gi, and Red 13 sees his father and he learns the truth about who his father really was, and he finds out that his father was not a coward. He did not run and abandon his people. He sacrificed himself to ensure that they could keep going and protected them. And that's such a sad scene. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it because of the music and, you know, the howling from Red 13 and seeing the statue start to cry. And then later in the story, Red 13 is dressed up as a Shinra infantryman trying to pass himself off as a human, and he's wearing these super tight, uncomfortable clothes, and his little animations are super cute and adorable. So there's no push and pull between that tone. It's balanced really well in the original game, and I think they're nailing it even more in 7 Remake, and I can't even wait to see how they do it in Rebirth. It'll be interesting to see how they continue to balance that stuff, and that was a massive issue that I had with 16. Not to continue to dump on 16, but 16 is a game where for most of its runtime, it takes itself very seriously. And it's this really dark and dour, depressing tone throughout pretty much the entire game. And while there are some small moments of levity, characters like Lord Byron, who are mostly positive and jovial, and whenever they're around, they lift up characters like Clive and Jill, those instances are pretty few and far between. So you really just kind of have that same tone going throughout 16, and it became very exhausting to me by the end of that game. And I had a lot of issues with 16 in regards to its story and its pacing. And, you know, I enjoy a dark story as much as the next person, but 65 hours of darkness, which was my original playthrough of 16, was just a little too much. And I think the perfect example of that is 16 is very Shakespearean in a way. It's, I've slept in the muck, in the mud, I've killed men, I will avenge my brother and save this world that's full of slaves and evil magic. And then the flip side of that is Final Fantasy VII, which is, hey man, you want to ride a big ass chicken? Our buggy's got lightning bolts on the side. You know, so it's just that overall tone, it's really refreshing when you go through something super dark, but then you can also have something that's lighthearted and fun to kind of balance that out. And I think you really do need that, especially if you're going to be playing a game for 100 hours. With that being said, that is pretty much the gist of the article. Those were the two things that really kind of stuck out to me the most. And I'm a real big stickler for character growth and relationships. And if you can find a way to incorporate that into gameplay, you got me immediately. I think that is beautiful. And of course, balancing that tone is super important. So I am curious, Corduroy, let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think of Hamaguchi's comments in regards to those character relationships and bonds, and adding in things like synergy skills and abilities, not just to freshen up combat, but because they wanted to find a way to incorporate the actual writing and scenario into the combat. And what do you guys think about tone? Is tone something that's very important to you? Do you really like the super dark, grimy stuff, or do you like a nice balance? I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.